Hello, guys, and welcome back to Hot Sport. We are now ready for day 3 of my podcast with Asaf from Riding the Bench Eagles podcast. We've gone over the Super Bowl, the offseason guide for the Eagles, and this episode now, we will address the NFL draft. I will be revealing my official mock draft for Hot Sport. We will be getting Asaf's opinions and takes on our official mock draft. Maybe a lot from the Eagles' point of view. So unlike last year, which I kind of was very neutral about the entire NFL, I had the opportunity to have a fellow YouTuber podcaster alongside me to analyze my mock draft. So this is a bit more from an Eagles-centric point of view, but still, NFL fans, you will see my official mock draft revealed in this episode. It's going to be a lot of fun. This is my most favorite of the 3, just because I get to reveal to you guys my mock draft. I hope you guys enjoy, and make sure you're hitting the like button. Make sure you are subscribing to Hotsport, and make sure that you give my boy Asaf, the Riding the Bench podcast, a subscription. I will be leaving the link below for you guys to go check that one out. And yeah, this is it. This is the last part of our 4-hour podcast. I hope you guys enjoy. And yeah, here we go. Part 3 right here on the NFL show on Hotsport. So let's talk about the rest of them. So this is the way I think. Let's going to talk about where we think we can target in the draft, right? And then I'll show you my mock draft, and then we'll talk about how the Eagles attack the positions and where. So my thing I would say is that in the first 3 rounds, we need 3 of these 4 positions addressed, in my opinion. Defensive tackle, I would say offensive lineman, whether it's at tackle to be some sort of future guy for Lane Johnson, but I still think we're too premature for that still, especially not in this year's draft, right? Need a tight end, I'd say. And I'd say that we need an edge rusher, right? So I think unless we trade back, which is a very good possibility, and end up being able to plug all 4 of those holes in the first 3 rounds, we'll probably end up being like 2 2s, a 3, and a 4 that plug. No.
Yeah, it would be that because you traded back.
Yeah, correct. Unless you were able to do, or maybe it would be 2 2s, 2 3s as well. No, that's another.
You'll have 3 to 5 picks in the second, third, fourth round if you trade back,
Right.
basically.
So of those 4, I think you're saying to me that the one you'd be most comfortable letting slip through the cracks to being a 4th rounder would be guard?
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
So that means you're saying that tight end we address in the draft?
We probably will, but I don't know if it's from a rookie. I think it might be like a veteran tight end, somebody that they trade for, or they don't even address it at all, or they don't even address it at all.
In here, I've got Jahan Dotson as someone we traded for. I mean, of course, this is a different level. I think Jahan Dotson was a nice little addition, but it was a necessity. We're talking about something at a higher scale here in terms of where we see how we may be trading. Of course, Adam Schefter has mentioned, I don't know if you saw that. Okay.
Yeah, that we're going to be players in the draft to be able to trade at some.
Yeah, so again, he's saying that Howie's going to be active in looking to trade in the draft. Again, I think some people look at that and be like, what are you talking about? What an easy. I would call that a low risk prediction here.
That's what I said too.
Where, make so smart on something very obvious. But when I read that, I thought that maybe he actually might value using the draft picks to acquire players off other teams' rosters that are good players rather than actually picking.
That's also a possibility. And it might, again, one of those positions might actually just be tight end because it's such a hard position to hit on. So we talked about it before. Michael Mayer, Dawson Knox, maybe just somebody like that you could throw in maybe a 3rd, 4th round pick at them. That's enticing enough. And then, whatever you do with Dallas Goedert down the road, whether or not you trade him or you cut him, then you at least have something out there that's a veteran presence in the room that you can kind of viably say, hey, we have a starting tight end here,
Yeah. So
So
I would also say, by the way, because you marked it already, inside linebacker, we'd say internal because we've got Trotter.
yeah, I
Or the
believe so. And
Kaiser.
again, for a
Or we
temporary
go down the
fix.
Kaiser White route as well if we needed to add extra depth in the position as well, or something like that.
Right,
Yeah.
100%.
Okay. But must draft, you'd say defensive tackle is a must.
I think you must draft defensive lineman, edge and interior lineman, and I think you got to take a shot at safety.
So the thing is that edge for me was a candidate to be the Timu position potentially, or the Zach Bond equivalent. I think, as I said, if anybody that we've acquired that could pop to be
Is
the Zach
Ojulari, you
Bond,
think?
Aziz Ojulari, or Josh Uche, one of the two. That's why for me, I'd rather draft a Walter Nolan. I was trying my best to avoid saying names because we can make it more fun when we talk about the draft itself. But for me, I would try to acquire, I'd rather have a Walter Nolan in the first round than a Donovan Ezeraku, for instance. If
But
you,
that I agree with. Totally agree with you on that.
I really highly rate Donovan Ezeraku. And if we ended up with him as our first round pick, I probably would still be fine with it.
Right. No, but I get you. But I agree with you. I think I would rather Walter Nolan at that point between the two players for sure. It feels more of a need.
Yeah, correct. And the other one I'd say, so I'd say we're going to draft. So you said draft edge, draft ET, or draft tight end slash. And would you
I think it's a
say
trade. I think tight end's a
or
trade.
trade?
I think tight end will be a trade. I think we draft linemen, interior defensive lineman and edge. And I think depending on how this first round pick goes, if a guy like Starks falls to you, I think they will just take him.
Well, I'll show you my mock draft in a
Yeah.
second. But something
Right.
like that happened when I was going through, when I was doing through mock drafts, and I'll show you how I did my mock drafts. It's a bit different than almost
Fair enough.
all people
I'm
do it.
not gonna. I didn't do a lot of mock
Yeah,
drafts. I'm not a fan of them,
a lot of people do
but
it using a
I try
simulator.
to keep up and understand what teams need and
So a lot of
how
people
the
do it
board should
using
play out.
simulators. I actually have gone through. It's actually you laugh, but I used Madden ratings as a way to figure out every team's needs, just
Oh,
because it
did
kind of
you?
gives you
Okay.
an idea of the holes in everybody's rosters, right?
Right.
Then I identified where I felt everybody had a hole, and then I just kind of picked, kind of using a chart. So like I used like kind of maybe all the needs that they had, depending on how many draft picks they had. So if they have 7 draft picks, their top 7 needs, and then you rank them from 1 to 7. And so the way you do, you kind of go 1 through 4 in the first round. Who is the strongest, best player available in the draft? 1 through 4. That's our pick, sort of thing. With the exception of being quarterback. So a lot of teams are quarterback needy. You forget about what it is and you just go take it. You know what I'm
Okay.
saying?
Yeah.
We'll get that in a second. The last one, safety. Do you think, you just mentioned, you said you think it could be a draft thing? I'd say it's a draft thing if that's what the first round gives
Yes, if
you.
that's what the first round dictates. But if we're not, if Starks ain't there, we're getting a veteran.
So here's a question. If you had a true chance to choice between Nori and let's say,
So Emin Warrior and who else?
because for me, I think
I
I'm
would trade
picking up
back.
Nori.
I'd trade back.
Well, yeah, okay, that's another thing. I think for me, a lot, you're going to ask me a lot of this stuff, these questions, you're going to ask me truly, I'd also say trade back.
Yeah, and I think I would trade back. I think the only player that I would take at 30, there's only a couple of players who I would take at 32. I would take Pierce at 32 if he's there. I would take Walter Nolan if he's there, and I would take Starks if he's there. Outside of that, you'd be really hard pressed for me to take somebody at
See,
32.
the best thing for me, and as I'll go through, the best thing for me is if somebody values Emin Worry more than they do Starks.
Right.
Because
Again, maybe it's Minnesota. Maybe
because
it's
in
Minnesota
most of the
or
drafts, I'll
Buffalo.
tell you this much, in most of the drafts, Emin Worry is available at 32.
Yeah.
Like Starks has been taken off the board. If you were to flip flop that, the team that needs Starks, which I believe the moment is Seattle the most, so that's where that safety thing really comes into play. If they like Emin Worry, which I, by the way, I've seen a few mock draft expert guys pick Emin Worry there. If he gets taken by Seattle, Starks will fall to 32.
Well, unless Minnesota decides to take a safety too,
I don't believe that
because they lost their safety to the
the, the,
Colts.
th- the thing is that Minnesota have a very small, they have 4 picks. So they do have, outside of course having, bought in 2 defensive linemen, the third defensive lineman on their roster isn't really that hot. I reckon they'd probably want to bring in a D lineman, Minnesota, play him next to Jonathan Allen
Fair
and
enough. Yeah.
what's the name? That guy I used to have on our team. Oh, wait, I'm going to look it back on Javon Hargrave. So the guy at the moment who'd be starting for them right now is Harrison Phillips. He's 29 years old. He's had a very average NFL career. I think that they'd want to, considering that Hargrave is a one-year guy, to create probably a long-term guy. So that's actually where I had Walter Nolan going in my. But finally, on safety, I'd say you would say either an opportunity there, or we would just wait to the end of the draft, pick up a Justin Simmons.
Justin Simmons or a Blackman or something like that. I think that's where they would go. I think he would pick up Blackman because Sirianni was with him in Indianapolis.
So let's do this. Let me get my mock draft up. I'm only going to do the first round, and then we'll just kind of maybe talk about doing maybe an Eagles only one, but just look at where we can go as deep at the first round. But for me, to be honest, it's the first 3 to 4 rounds that's the most important to me because we've got 4 5s, but I don't believe that we will be keeping all of those.
All 4 of them. I think we're going to use the package them right.
All right, so this is my mock draft. This is a kind of consensus thing, and I've done maybe a few and then averaged them out into the most likely scenarios. So I've run about 3 different scenarios of what happens the most likely. It's kind of I've actually done pretty well when I do mock drafts in the past. I'm pretty proud of that. So I got the Titans number 1 going Cam Ward. The Browns, I got Travis Hunter. I'm taking going to Cleveland. I just think my main idea behind that is that I think Cleveland has got a lot of holes on their roster, and edge is not one of them. A lot of people have been saying Abdul Carter, but I would say for them to have a more well-rounded roster, they have a hole at actually both corner and wide receiver. So regardless of where you want to play Travis Hunter, I think he'll have a more of a benefit to them than an Abdul Carter would. So that's my second pick. I actually got New York since they added Russell Wilson and James Winston. I've got them going Mason Graham, DT. Then I got Abdul Carter going to Patriots, and I've actually got Tyler Warren going in the top 5 to Jacksonville.
Okay.
Then I got Ashton Genty falling to 6. Not falling, but I think this is
that's where he gets picked.
Where he gets picked, yeah, at number 6. Then I got the Jets. It depends what you want, Membu or Campbell. I actually think that the Jets have a need in interior linemen, so I see Campbell as a better guard than Membu, and Membu is a better tackle, if that makes sense. So I went Campbell to the Jets. Carolina at this point, it was between Will Johnson or Ted McMillan, but I just think that from a drafting standpoint, I'd still rather strengthen in the secondary. I think it's a bigger priority. So I went with Will Johnson, and I got Shedeur Sanders going to the Saints to play with Kellen Moore. Yeah, I said this on Birds 360. Mark my words, Shedeur Sanders ends up in New Orleans. Then I went the Bears getting Membu. I know that they went and they trade for some offensive linemen. I think that's kind of where their priorities are, and I think they're going to put a first-round pick. They already have a first-round pick on the other side, so then they're going to, I think, put them on 2 sides. They're going to have like bookend tackles, I think, and their offensive line would be sick if they had that. Then I got Jalen Walker. I think they've been looking, Francisco has been looking either to replace Greenlaw, which Walker can play linebacker, or to put a guy opposite Bosa. I think either way they've been looking for one of those positions. I think whichever way you look, he can do both. And then I got Dallas clearly. They had
going wide receiver. Yeah.
Going wide receiver opposite CeeDee Lamb. Ted McMillan, who's the best outside of, depending what you think Hunter is, the best pure receiver in the draft. And Dolphins, given the Jalen Ramsey news, and also they lost Javon Holland. So regardless of where you want to play Jahdae Barron at corner at safety, I think he fits perfectly there. And that's, again, the Colson Loveland falling to Indy, which I think we said is kind of a guarantee. Whether Tyler Warren, I think, either goes at 5 or at 7. And if not, we'll drop to 14. Would you not agree?
I agree. Totally.
Yeah. Or Dallas takes him at 12.
Or Dallas takes him. Right.
Yeah. Or maybe New Orleans. But I think given that my reason for Shedeur Sanders is because if he's available there, I know one of the things that Kalen Moore needed was his ability to pick the quarterback. And that was a big drawback when he was originally interviewing for the role, was the fact that they only had really Derek Carr in place and no QB of the future. I think Shedeur Sanders allows him to have a quarterback he can mold. He's got a good track record with QBs, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, and Sanders fits the mold of quarterback that he likes to work.
He doesn't have to start him year 1. You got Derek Carr in the building. I just think that was a perfect. Then I got Atlanta. They don't have many picks in this draft, but they do have a glaring hole at linebacker. So I'm taking Jahad Campbell. I have Arizona taking Mike Green. Again, depending where you feel Mike Green is in terms of the sexual misconduct allegations, this is where I think he'll get picked. The other possibility is he could fall out of the first round altogether, which I think would be good for us because it would give us better options as well at edge rusher if that does happen. Yeah.
True that.
And I got Cincinnati. I got James Pierce going here, and then of course this is the void I've got at safety. I think Seattle will go either they go Starks or they go O line. For us, we would hope that either they draft him in Warrior or they take an O lineman. That would be the perfect scenario for us. Because I
Yeah.
think from around this Arizona 16 to 32, I think that's really where the draft starts for us.
Fair
Or
enough.
maybe even go 14 Loveland if you want to take a
Right,
first.
whatever the Colts do. Yeah, that makes
Right.
sense. I tend
Yeah.
to agree with that for the most
Yeah.
part.
Then I got Tampa Bay. They need help at the edge rushing position. I got them taking Shamar Stewart. The Broncos, I got them taking Emeka Ibuka from Ohio State. And then the Steelers get a steal and Kelvin Banks. I'm dropping down all the way down to 21. And then the Chargers, I got taking Michael Williams, obviously to replace Boza, who's left. And then here's where the DTs fall off the board. A lot of people don't really like Kenneth Grant. I actually tend to think he's a really good player, and people forget how good he was last year when they won the national title. So I got Grant, and a lot of people have Grant. A little bit, maybe some have Grant or Nolan. I don't know which you prefer as the second best, but just doesn't really matter in terms of the Eagles' perspective because I got them going back to back. Then I got, of course, Texans need a big help on the O line. I got them taking Booker. The Rams was hard to tell because the needs is very interesting. Like a position of need wasn't really available as first round quality, so I can
But
see
they're
them
good. They're a good
trading
football team.
out at this position. But in my mock, there's no trades. I just have them taking Luther Burden.
Hmm.
The Ravens, as always, get an amazing first round steal. They get Josh Simmons. And then I got the Lions taking Ezra Raku. The Commanders replacing Jonathan Allen with Derek Harmon. The Bills adding much needed, weaponry for Josh Allen and Matthew Golden, which is a steal at 30. And then I think the Chiefs took Ray Zabel. I think that's, what I mean? They not just needed help on the O line, they traded the best O lineman away to Chicago, right? So I think that's a steal. And then for us, there are two first round quality ranked players that I had there. It was between Nick Emenwari and Omarion Hampton, the running back, which clearly is
Yeah.
not going to be the picks. By
No.
default, if we're sticking at 32 here, I have us taking Emenwari. And by the way, in the second round, just to skip ahead, this is the only one I had. We got Jack Sawyer falling to us, but it was between him and the Ole Miss edge, which I like a lot, Inslee Uman
Hmm.
I think I have Sawyer as a higher ed prospect, so I did take Sawyer. Anyway, what are your thoughts on my mock draft, and how would you attack the draft?
Well, I'll tell you, if the draft played out this way, if Emin Mori is
You would
there,
trade
I,
back.
I would trade back.
Yeah.
I would be trading back and maybe trading a pick with somebody in the top of the draft. So maybe a team like, maybe a Patriots because I think they're a sleeper team who may want to make some noise, or maybe a team like,
Our QB team,
you know,
needing team. So I got the next pick at 33. The Browns going with Jackson Dart. So like
right. So maybe it's a team like that just shoots up, gets their quarterback in the
again, we're
future in
just
the
picking
fifth
one pick
round.
later, right? So they
But it's one pick later, but you lose the fifth year option,
right.
right? So that's kind of so if you're a team that's looking for a quarterback, getting that fifth year option might be a game changer for you. So if you're Cleveland and it does fall the way it does, where they take Travis Hunter or an Abdul Carter or something like that with their second pick and they wait for a quarterback, if Jackson Dart's still on the board at that point and Pittsburgh doesn't decide to take a quarterback, then all of a sudden you're talking to Cleveland and you're saying, hey, Andrew Berry, you want this 32nd pick for the fifth round option for your quarterback of the future? We'll trade back with you.
By the way, the reason why I didn't have Pittsburgh taking a quarterback is because I don't. My philosophy is I just don't think that Jackson Dart's a first round quarterback, and
Fair
that
enough.
Pittsburgh probably can get an Aaron Rodgers, I think, or they can go and still get a Jalen Milroe, in maybe the second or third round.
Right, which is also fair. But,
They have a
again, who
bigger
knows?
need at O line. Like their O line.
Pittsburgh needs to take a chance on
Yeah,
something. You know what I'm saying? And yeah, they do need O linemen. That's 100% true.
yeah,
So certainly not faulting you in that. I'm just saying, like, they're
yeah.
quarterback needy teams who, like Cleveland, the Saints, the Steelers, right? Like, I don't think any other team here is looking for a quarterback here. You know what I mean? So That would probably be the thing that I would do. If this draft falls the way it does, I would call Cleveland and say, hey, let's swap. Give me like a pick or two to, drop back in. You could take your quarterback in the future, get a fifth year option on him so you have extra time to evaluate. And it's not like you're losing the player. You're going to take him anyway, but you'll just get an extra year out of it. So,
And in that scenario, would you still take Warrior at pick 33?
no, I'd probably take Scorton.
Okay, so Scorton. And I got Scorton in my draft. He ended up going
Going to
44.
Dallas.
Yeah.
I'd probably take Scorton at that point, and then see what happens see what happens at 64 if another edge player
The other
falls
one,
to you.
again, in there's Donovan Jackson, but you aren't a fan of going guard with our first pick, are you?
No, because I just think that if you could trade back and get 2 second-round defensive linemen to address a couple needs, that would be ideal. Because again, the cool thing about Philly is that you don't need them to be superstar players. You just need them to be competent rotational players. So, you know what I mean? Like it's truly by committee in Philadelphia with defensive end and defensive linemen and stuff like that. So if you can get a guy like Scorton who can give you quality play, and again, they still have Bryce Huff on the roster, and I know people hate him, and I don't like him either. But you know what? They invested a lot of money in him. They're going to give him the opportunity to play. He's going to get playing time, right? So they're going to get him out there on the field, and they're going to see what they have in a guy like him. So we have to keep him in mind. You have Ojulari, like you said. Josh Uche is going to be there. You have a Jomo, Davis, Carter, Booker, right? Like, there's a lot of guys here that they're going to trot out there. And I think if you just get a guy like Scorton who can give you some size on the edge, and
Actually, I
again,
do like Scorton for that very reason, because in
I
general,
like
the
Scorton.
rest of our edge rushers are very small.
Yeah, and like again, I think he's athletic. I think he's a relentless player. Like his motor's really good. In terms of just because I did an evaluation on Scorton and how I think he would fit Philadelphia. I think he actually is just really raw. As a prospect, right? He played at A&M, so it's a big time program. He's not used to, he's not going to be dwindling in the bright lights, so to speak. I love the closing speed that he has. When he's like a foot or two away from the court, like he's gonna get to sacks. He just has to get there. And he has a silky smooth spin move as a pass rushing move. He's just silky smooth with it. Almost Dwight Freeney like.
Yeah, that's a good shout.
You know what I mean? Like it's butter. So he just needs, if he has the tutelage of a Clint Hurt, of a Vic Fangio, and like getting in the room with some of these other veterans here, and you pair him with Carter, Davis, Nolan, Hunt, like you have a quality pick. And remember, it's a second-round pick. It's not like you're breaking your back for the kid, And then who knows how the rest of the draft goes at that point? Because if a guy like a Jack Sawyer ends up falling to you at 64, then all of a sudden you're cooking with fire because
See, look, in my mock here, the first 3 rounds, we're walking away with Warrior and Jack Sawyer. That's not a bad haul for not being able
no,
to
not
move.
at all. I
So
just
this is a
don't
no
believe that they're
trade.
going to
This is
go
a no
first round at
trades
safety.
mock, right? So we've not moved at all, and we've still been able to get probably
Quality
two
player.
quality players.
Yeah, I agree with, and that's it. I just don't know if Philadelphia is going to take a safety in the first round because I don't think they look at safety and they say, hey, yeah, we have the fifth year option at safety, but how much is a fifth year option for a safety in the first round? Is that comparable to what you would get in the open market for a player?
I
Like
mean,
if you're going to pay $8 million for a safety, that's a veteran. Why would I do that for a fifth year option for a rookie when I could just pay a 1 year deal to a safety?
the way that I would look at it, and actually, I disagree with Philly 500 on this because he keeps talking about safety, 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 and I just keep saying no, D line, D line, D line. And the only reason I've taken safety is because it's how the board fell. The only argument I could say is the one that he's given is that safety has been a rotating door for us. We've never had stability at the position really since Malcolm Jenkins. So CJ's been here twice. We tried the Kevin Byard, and Terrell Edmonds was also in there for half the season. That didn't work out really at all. Like we got Reed Blankenship in there, but you need to have that second guy, and maybe that second guy is Sidney Brown. You know what I mean? But
Who knows?
you
Who
get,
knows?
but I would feel a lot more confident with an Warrior and a Starks next season than a Sidney Brown. But maybe I'm wrong on that. Question is, if Sidney Brown was in the 2025 NFL draft, we got him as a third rounder, how would he shake up? Because I think To be honest, to be quite frankly, outside of a few players, most of these players in the first round are second or third round talents in other drafts.
Right. And that's part of the reason why I think I wouldn't take Emin with the first pick at 32. It's part of the reason why I think we would trade back at that point because it's not like you're losing any value with him versus a guy like Sidney Brown. Like, what's the difference between starting Nick Emin or starting Sidney Brown? Like, they're both have similar traits in terms of athleticism and their ability to be aggressive and get after ball carries and stuff. I mean, Nick Emin again, I did an evaluation on him too. I think he's a super great athlete, decent tackler. He's got good speed, plays downhill, but he's also not very great in coverage. And that's kind of what you have to be able to do in a Vic Fangio scheme. You got to be able to cover ground. He doesn't take very good angles in coverage. He's just a very raw prospect. He needs a lot of guidance and a lot of veterans back there to help him, and we don't have that. Yeah, you have Reed Blankenship, who's like a really good communicator and a veteran presence in that sense because he's super smart, but Darius Slay ain't there no more. James Bradbury ain't there no more. You don't have Avante Maddox there anymore who are offering that veteran tutelage and that veteran leadership out there. Your veteran leadership is Adoree Jackson. And with all due respect to Adoree Jackson, he's not Slay, he's not Bradbury, and he's not Avante Maddox in terms of leadership. So when you take a player like Emin who, again, physically is gifted, you need to have presence. And yeah, you got good coaching, but
I'm going to say Christian Parker, I reckon would be.
Yeah, and I know Christian, and he's a quality, and he's a damn good coach because he is. He's a really damn good coach, and I know you would get a lot out of him. I just don't know if Philadelphia values safety at that price point,
right?
As opposed to a lineman.
Just to be candid, I completely agree with what you're saying.
Yeah, and again, I know you did this draft in the premise of like there's no trades happening and stuff like that. You kind of just took it as is. So in that sense, I wouldn't be too upset either with Emin. I think I would rather probably just take a defensive lineman.
You'd rather reach on a second round D lineman and at 32, you think it's of more value.
Yeah, because again, I also don't know how much
late first rounders and the second rounders, right?
Say again?
As in, look, what's the difference between the late first rounders and the second rounders?
Exactly. Especially in this draft, there's not that much of a difference, you know? So
yeah,
that's kind of where I'm at with that.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so look, again, in this draft, if you look at it, you see pick 50, I've got Elijah Arroyo, and pick 57, I got Mason Taylor. That tight end, that third round would you say have to be tight end, or would you, in this scenario, or are you still saying I don't have my defensive tackle in there?
No, I'd get
and that's the problem. I don't want my mock to be right, to be honest, because the problem here is we have not addressed defensive tackle in the first round or in the second round.
Mm-hmm. So which is fine because Moro Ojomo was a 7th round pick too. You know what I'm saying? Like
was a third.
Like say one more time.
Milton was a third, by the way.
So. Milton was a third, but Ojomo was a 7th or a 6th or a 7th round pick, right? So it's not like you have to go super crazy on trying to get an interior defensive lineman. Like you said, they have a track record of picking guys in the 3rd, 4th, 5th round who are quality linemen. So even if it does pan out where you take 2 edges or 2 defensive ends or outside guys as your first 2 picks, that 3rd and 4th pick could be an interior lineman, and you can kind of let tight end drop down because, again, they kind of been talking about tight end very dismissively in terms of what they value there. They have Brian Granson, Calcaterra there, I think they're comfortable with rolling with that as a committee, you know what I mean? So, and if Dallas Goedert isn't there and you have Martavis Bryant and Grant Calcaterra there, Martavis Bryant at least is known to be a decent run blocker too. So, and if you're going to throw the ball, you're throwing it to Calcaterra at that point anyway. So it's not like in that sense you're losing that much at tight end.
You'll still think though, when you have 2 different tight ends of different skills and when you plug them in, it makes it very predictable for the defense to read where you're going because they're going to be like, oh, Harrison Bryant's in the game. This is a run. Calcaterra's in the game. This is a pass.
Well, that's only if you're
running. I like having a Dallas Goedert, which can do both and makes him a bit more unpredictable. You know what I mean?
Right, but again, how much does that really play a role when the talent is just so immense on the offensive side of the ball? You know what I'm saying? Everybody in Philadelphia can look at this team and say, yeah, this is what we're going to do week to week. But the talent is so immense, the offensive line so dominant, and the receivers. Everybody knew the most unstoppable play was a slant to AJ Brown, and yet, it was 3rd and 3,
We
3rd and 4.
didn't
You
go
run a
to as
slant,
often as I
and all of
want.
a sudden, it's a first down because it's AJ Brown getting the ball, but like nobody could stop it, right?
Right.
But I think at that point talent takes over, and Philadelphia, it's better than anybody else in the NFL. You know what I'm saying? So, but again, it also kind of goes back to what we talked about in the beginning. Not that they're punting on the season, but I don't think they really care too much about the outcome of 2025 if they're a 10-win team or 11-win team and they get to the playoffs. I don't think they care about
I
the outcome
kind of
at that
think it's a somewhere in the middle. Think that they do care about the outcome of 2025, but they are wanting to show the NFL, like, look, if you let us go back to back, given that we've taken torch to our defense and we still dominate you, I think sort of the way how he's looking at it is like there's a gap between us and who's second. Who did we play in the Super Bowl? How did that turn out? How did
Yeah,
the NFC
100%.
Championship turn out? Those teams have catching up work to do with us. We don't have to go out there and make big swings. We don't.
No,
And
no, we don't.
actually the blessing of having a crap draft after winning a Super Bowl is it makes it harder for everyone else to catch up with us. It was a not a great free agency market. It was not a great draft. Okay, so we took some steps back, but who took a step forward?
So
Who
where did we
took a
take a
step
step
back?
forward? I guess
But
is my.
who of our competitors took a step forward?
I think the Rams are going to take a step forward. They draft very well. I think the Commanders took a step forward. I think,
You think though? Because they lost some key guys.
sure they did, but
Jonathan Allen is a
again,
big piece to that defense.
yeah,
He's
but
a
he was
more important
also
piece,
injured
the
a
bigger piece
majority of the
than
year.
what we lost. Jonathan Allen is a more of a vital piece to the Washington defense than any of the guys that we lost.
Yeah, but he had a torn pec for the majority of the year too. It's not like he was playing all year with them either. You still have Dan Quinn. You retained Cliff Kingsbury. You have Jaden Daniels, who has another year under his belt, and you got Debo Samuel, who, albeit again is a little bit long in the tooth, but he's still an upgrade at what they have over there. I think they upgraded a little bit more on their overall roster. Adam Peters is a quality GM. I think we can't just dismiss that. And not only that, you have to look at the schedule that we play in Philadelphia. We have the hardest because we're the champions, and this is what happens when you're the NFL champs. You get the hardest schedule going into the next season. And some of the road teams that we got to play the Rams, the Bills, the Chiefs, the Chargers. Like there's a lot of quality teams that we play against that are going to be gunning for the champs. So it's not like Washington has like a super hard schedule per se. I haven't really looked at their games, but I'm going to assume
Second place schedule would be.
right. And again, with a little bit of an upgrade that they have made with their roster, plus not being Super Bowl champions, it's not like they're going to have that much of a drop off either. Dallas is going to be better this year. I don't care what anybody tells me because you got Dak Prescott there. He's a quality starter. Like you say what you want, they're going to probably be a 9-10 win team as well. They may even split with Philadelphia.
You
They
think
may
that
even split with Washington.
you think of Dallas that highly?
I think that highly of Dak
I
Prescott.
think as well. Okay, you just thought about Dak Prescott, but think as well. Like they lost Tank Lawrence, for instance. That's why I've got them going in picking Scorton
Sure.
in the second round.
Yeah, but like Lawrence isn't like that great of a player either. Like he's good. He's not great.
I mean, I
You know?
reckon if he came to Philly, he'd be the best edge rusher on our roster.
Yeah, but he would also be like a significantly more expensive player. You know what I'm saying? So again, and I understand your point that Dexter Lawrence. I'm not saying he's a bad player. He's a quality player, but like I think Dallas has shown that you could. They're good enough to replace talent. They draft decently well enough where they're not going to just try. Look, how many games did they win with freaking Cooper Rush at quarterback? 7, 8 games? You know what I mean? Like I know everyone thinks that it was a bad season, and it was, but like 7 to 8 wins with Cooper Rush as your starting quarterback.
They've also lost again. I think just going through it, they've also lost Zach Martin.
Right, which is a big blow. Totally get it. But again, I'm not picking Dallas to be, you know, this 12-win juggernaut here. You
Yeah.
tell me they can't win 9 to 10 games on the season though? They're getting a third place schedule. They're getting their starting quarterback back. And say what you want about Dak Prescott, at least in the regular season, he's a viable option out here.
Yeah.
And they're going to get more talent in this draft, like you said. I know they don't have a lot of money out there to invest in free agency and stuff, and they're not really aggressive in that sense. But you can't tell me that they can't split with Washington. You can't tell me that they don't give the Eagles a run for their money every single year, considering that they're a rival of ours. And for majority of Dak Prescott's career, he plays very well against Philadelphia. So, like, I know there's a gap between us and the rest of the league, but it ain't like it's a huge gap. Like Philadelphia took steps back with their losses, and teams are getting better. It ain't like teams are just sitting around folding their hands doing nothing.
Right.
And the Rams are going to be better. They got young talent on that defensive line. They know how to draft. They got another year under their belt. McVay and Stafford, elite
By the way,
combination
on
in
that
terms of quarterback head coach.
conversation, I know you're going to disagree with me because of the coordinators, but I still think that the Lions are the second best team in the NFC. I know, like,
Talent
people,
wise, I get you.
like, they were, like, until that Washington game, and of course, like, I feel like their season was derailed with the injuries they had on the defensive side of the ball.
Right.
Like I know a lot of people like us on the surface looking at it are like, oh, their defense wasn't that good anyway when it was healthy. That's not true at all. They've got some really good in fact, I'd say right now, today, with the losses that we haven't addressed, their defense is probably better than ours at this point right now.
At least talent wise on paper, maybe, but they're also not in the easiest division either.
I mean,
They're not in the easiest division at all.
you look at the Rams, right? You're talking about the Rams. Okay, they brought in Devontae Adams, but they've also lost Cooper Kupp. So I actually say it's a bit of a downgrade because I think that at the moment Cooper Kupp is playing better ball than Devontae Adams overall.
I disagree with you on that front. I
You do?
believe.
You
I
think?
do. I do. I think Devontae Adams is a huge upgrade considering that there's an injury history with Cooper Kupp. And I know that not that Devontae Adams is like this juggernaut player, but you know what? You put him alongside of a player like Puka Nacua. You have Matt Stafford there. You have Sean McVay there. It's not like you're not looking at this team and hold on one second.
Like, for me, oh, that's all good.
You still got me, yes?
Yeah, I've still got you.
Yeah, so something happened on my computer where it like spazzed out, so I was making sure everything's good. No, I guess my point being is that the Rams are in a division where
I love having a conversation about an argument that's got nothing to do with the Eagles. It's got to do with who's the second best.
no, again, it's the second. Again, I think the Rams are the second best team in the NFC. Like, I think if anybody's going to give us a run for their money, it's the Los Angeles Rams. Like, I think they're that quality of a team. I think they're really talented. I think they have a young, youthful roster, and I think they have a GM who just knows what they're doing, and they have an elite coach in
But
Sean
they
McVay.
also are going to have to address their defense. Like I know they've actually got some really good young pieces, especially on the D line. But man, we played them twice. That they cannot tackle that defense.
No, but they're also young. It's also a young group. I get it. But you know what? That's also the one team that gave us the biggest run for our money and was in a position to steal a game at Lincoln Financial Field. People want to dismiss that, and you can't.
No.
Sean McVay is a Super Bowl winning head coach. Matt Stafford, in terms of talent, like I can argue he's top 5 versus Jalen Hurts. Like I can argue that, and it wouldn't be a silly conversation. Matt Stafford is that elite. You upgrade from Cooper Kupp, in my opinion, to Devontae Adams. You still have Puka Nacua. You got the running game with Kyron Williams, and you're probably going to get even better in the offensive line and getting more players and drafting, more depth at that position. And then on defense, it's a young front seven. They get after the quarterback. You saw what they did to Minnesota, and you saw how well they played against Philadelphia. Now, I know they can't stop the run, and I get that. That's important, and they're probably going to try to do everything in their offseason to address that. But we can't sit here and say that they're not going to get better.
A receiver in the first round. By the way, I got them taking a first receiver in the first round, which, by the way, if you put Burden in the slot next to Nacua and Adams, that would be scary.
Right. That's a tough stop.
Yeah.
That's a tough stop.
Yeah.
And like if you're playing a shootout game with Matt Stafford, good luck. Like good luck trying to go shot for shot with a guy like Stafford when he's cooking. You know what I mean? He's as good as anybody. So, what I know talent wise, you look at Detroit and they're excellent. You look at talent wise, you look at Minnesota.
Is that Detroit like you were talking about what you were saying? That doesn't put fear into my heart. But what Detroit has is a two-headed monster. I get, by the way, the offensive and defensive coordinator thing is a big deal, and I think that's
A huge deal.
probably your main preface into why you probably prefer the Rams. That's why you keep saying talent-wise.
1,000%.
But talent-wise, that two-headed monster with Gibbs and Montgomery is insane. Like Gibbs is one of the hardest running backs to stop in the NFL. Full stop. Outside of your obviouses like Saquon's and your Henrys. Those receivers, you got St. Brown, you got Williams, Laporta as the tight end. The O line is second best to us in the NFL. Again, that's where I always kind of go to the trenches, the O line, the D line. Their O line outside of Philly is the best O line in the NFL,
Sure,
right?
but it's not like the Rams are that far off either. The Rams have a pretty good offensive line. The Rams have a pretty good defensive line. They're young and they're raw, but they're pretty talented over there as well. They have a running game where they get 1,300 yards out of Kyron Williams. McVay is a good run caller, run designer, play caller, and he's really good at being clever with his designs. And you have a quarterback who could check out of a bad situation into a great one and have the arm talent of a Josh Allen, of a Lamar, of a Mahomes, and the headiness of Burrow and the pocket presence of a Burrow. Like you got an elite quarterback in that Stafford. You got an elite play caller in McVay. And I don't know, Detroit, it's not like Dan Campbell's going to be willing this team to be being a juggernaut on offense. And remember,
Honestly,
we
who
look at
did they hire at OC the Detroit again?
in Detroit.
Yeah,
I don't know the name. We
because
can look that up.
the man that just went out, Ben Johnson, is one of the greatest offensive minds today at this point in time. So again, that is regardless of who
John Morton.
his background.
He was an offensive assistant in 2022, and he returns back to them.
So he was internal hire.
Looks like an internal hire. I think he previously served under the Denver Broncos as pass game coordinator, and then he spent 2022 with the Lions. So I think he was with Denver and Sean
Denver
Payton.
Broncos prior to last season were an absolute worst passing offense I've seen in my life. So that
Right. And again, Detroit, as good as they were last season, who were they throwing up the big numbers against? Look at their schedule.
now look, hey, you're singing my. That's what I was saying.
You know what I mean? So like we can look at Detroit all we want and say like, hey, you have all the talent in the world. Again, Detroit doesn't scare me. Not that the Rams scare me, but like, if I had a team in the NFC that I knew would give me a run for my money, I think it's the Rams.
Yeah,
And I
maybe
think it's because of that quarterback
maybe just looking
combo.
at it through Eagles glasses. Every time, like I know that second time it was again that playoff game was hard, and you bring it up, but I just keep going back to if we have to play on the road at SoFi Stadium, I'm not too scared. I also think a lot of
I
the
get you.
elements.
And again, we have the veterans to do it. That's not what I'm saying.
I
I'm just
think
saying for
Saquon
anybody.
Barkley went over 500 yards total, almost maybe 400 at least plus total over 2 games against them. If they have no way to take away Saquon, I'm not scared. Yeah,
Well, there's not a lot of teams that do, I guess is your point. Because then at that point, you shouldn't fear anybody in the NFL. But that's not real. You know what I'm saying? Like there are other teams in the NFL that have a lot of talent here. And again, I'm not looking at it in a game by game basis. I'm looking at it through the lens of like, hey, we're going to have the hardest schedule in the National Football League. Every team's going to be giving us their best effort because we're the Super Bowl champs. And the Rams, again, I know we want to dismiss the playoff game as a one-off, but you know what? Sean McVay and Matt Stafford as a playoff duo, they don't have a lot of losses together. They've only lost to
hey,
Detroit one time in Detroit by 1 point. It was a
they also
24-23
lost the
game.
opener last year, I believe, as well in overtime. I think.
Right, and it went down to the wire. And then the other loss they have in the playoffs is against Philadelphia, who was eventually the Super Bowl champions, right? So I'm not going to sit here and poo-poo what McVay, and again, this is also a conversation of how high I think of Sean McVay and how high I think of Matthew Stafford, because I do think outside of Andy Reid, there's no coach I'd rather have than Sean McVay. I know that sounds silly to say, but I don't think there's a coach that I'd rather have outside of Sean McVay. And outside of maybe the big four quarterback and maybe Jalen Hurts, there's no quarterback that I would want to go if I'm down by 6 and I need a drive to win the game, give me Matt Stafford and I'll kick your ass. Like 100% because he's that special. He's that elite. And I think they have that. And they're in a division that's super winnable. Seattle's not.
I mean, we don't know what San Francisco is going to be, but regardless of how much of a step back they took an even further step back in the losses that they've lost on that defense that was by far the best defense prior to last season is completely gone with the exception of Fred Warner and Nick Bosa, really. Like
Yeah,
they've got no
100%.
one in the D tackle position. They got no one on the opposite edge. They've lost Greenlaw in middle linebacker. So again, outside of Warner, they got nobody. Hufanga's now gone. They got nobody at safety. They got nobody. They do have Lenore, who I think is decent at corner, but he's not an elite corner.
They got to pay Purdy too. That's the other
Yeah,
conversation that we have to have. They got to pay Purdy.
yeah.
So again, Seattle doesn't scare you. They have Sam Darnold at quarterback. The Cardinals again, good team.
Cardinals could be decent. I think.
They can be, but they're probably going to win like
Like
eight,
if they
nine
add a
games
Mike
too.
Green, like I've put it in this draft, put him across from Josh Sweat, they'll have a
Right,
mean pass rush for Jonathan
right. But
Taylor.
then
And
you
we
got the
know what he
Kyler
can
Murray deal.
produce with a good pass rush.
Yeah. Again, like it's a quality team there, but like they're going to beat up on each other too. But I still think the Rams could win 10, 11 games and win the division. You know what I mean? And in an NFC like this, how many games do you think Philadelphia is going to win? I don't think they're winning 12 games with the schedule that we have.
I'd bet against that. I'd go 12 or over.
I think right
Last
now
year, that
the
people are
line is
telling me
set
is
at 11 and a half. I think the line is set at 11 and a half right now in
I'd
Vegas.
still take the over.
You'll take the okay, that's fine. I think I would take the under. I think we'd be right at 11 games. I think
Yeah.
that's where we would be at right now.
Yeah.
But again, that could change based on the draft too, right? So I
Yeah,
just think
again, there's so much more that can happen as we've been talking about. Like
yeah,
my main point, that's why I did that exercise here. This time last year before the draft, there was still a whole lot of unknowns and how he was able to not talking about, as I said, that's why I took the Saquon part of it out. Saquon already had signed. We knew Saquon was going to be a good running back regardless, right? Everything that happened from this point forward, really, I believe, is what won us the Super Bowl, right? DeJean, Mitchell, right? So we're gonna have to. The thing is, we're not going to be able. I don't think we're going to be able to have two players of impact like that. Like Mitchell and DeJean. Mitchell would be a top 10 pick in this year's draft. Like Mitchell's a better corner than Travis Hunter. Like,
yeah.
right? He would not even be a top 10 pick. He could be a top 5 pick, right? In this draft, Cooper DeJean is certainly a top half of the first round type of player. So there isn't really that. That is the one downside to how we turned around last year versus how we turned around this year. But it's very possible that he could still make this roster of the similar quality of it was last year. We just have to kind of wait and see and make this evaluation. I think maybe beyond that as we head in, as you said, as we head into training camp or into the preseason. And even then last year, we did not think the roster, we didn't know what Zach Bond was. Devin White didn't make the flight to Brazil. We're like, who the F is going to play at linebacker for us now?
Linebacker, right?
Like that's just the way football works. We do not have the answers at the moment, unfortunately. But we do not know. That's what I'm saying. The room for the Eagles to go, I think, to go back to the Super Bowl is still there, regardless of the losses that we've made. I still believe.
Oh yeah. I don't disagree with that either, right? Like let's not get it twisted. I still think in the NFC, your betting favorite should be Philadelphia, right? Like in terms of getting the number one seed, and if it has to go through the link, you're going to have to play an NFC title game in Philadelphia. My next question would be, which is the team that can go on the road and give you the best run for your money? You think it's Detroit. I just think it's the Rams, and I think that's just the difference in opinion here at this point.
I mean,
Because
to be honest, I think we beat either of them. But
okay,
my only
I
premise
don't
is
disagree with you. I don't disagree with you, especially at the link. But I just think the
that's
team that
where
can
I
give
look
us
at
the
it.
most run for our money is the Rams, in
That
my
that's the
opinion.
way I look at it from is if we are having to go on the road, Detroit for me seems like a much more of a overwhelming proposition than going to LA.
Well, what have the Lions proved in their history with Dan Campbell to suggest that? And I guess my point is the Rams have proven that with a Super Bowl title.
Yeah, I think that's a good pushback. I
You
do.
know,
Yeah.
so because we saw that
By the way, we're leaving
they were on the
Washington out
road
of
to San
this
Francisco
completely.
and
We're leaving Washington out of this completely, who's really our greatest threat because they could make us a 5 seed.
yeah, 100%. Absolutely. And again, we mentioned it before about the schedules. Like, it's not out of the realm of comprehension that Washington may win the division, like may, based on just
It
like how many games a team could win.
hasn't happened in 20 plus years. They have a back-to-back winner in there.
Right. So again, like a lot plays a role here. And, you know, not to mention Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay has our number if we go to the Tampa Bay. You know what I mean? Like,
You're going to open a can of fish. I'll push back on the Tampa Bay thing all day, every day. I don't think they have our number. Because, here's my premise. We actually went to Tampa on a Monday night, I think week 4, week 5 at last season, right? And we had our way with them with a fully fit team playing at night where we didn't have to deal with the extreme heat. This year we went into Tampa. We went in there without AJ Brown, Devontae Smith. I don't even think was Dallas Goedert even available in that game. We're missing like a plethora of offensive players. We were down to real bare bones. I believe like John Ross was starting at wide receiver for us this year. It was just a bad, bad week. And looking back on it, I wouldn't change a thing because it woke us up. We were super focused in the bye week. We came out of that on a tear that ended up winning a Super Bowl, so I wouldn't take it away. But I think that a lot went into that. And the previous one, we were, regardless of who we played in the first round, we were going out. This team had no fight in it. We were in the backslide. I didn't care who we were going to play on the road in the wild card weekend. We were going to lose. And AJ Brown also didn't play in that game, which made things even. I have yet to really see post Tom, and I'm not taking away that first round victory humbling that they gave us. That I will not take that. That for sure they had our number on, and they taught us a footballing lesson that day. Again, one that I do not regret because again, look how we built that offseason afterwards around Jalen.
Right. I get you. But listen, if we're gonna have that conversation, then there's no move that's happened that you can regret that because it's led to the point that we're at.
I don't
But
even
what you have to look
I don't even regret, and I know people bring it up all the time. When Doug dropped Jalen for that last game against Washington, that puts that if he doesn't do that, we don't get the draft equity to be able to move back, and we don't have on our roster right now Devontae Smith, AJ Brown, Jalen Carter, Cooper DeJean. Like you could say how it looks. Yeah, we lost our head coach, but we've also replaced him with a head coach that's won and been to more Super Bowls, and I didn't have a problem with it at all at the time. I also wanted us to tank for the draft position, you
right.
know?
I agree with you, but again, hindsight's also 2020, man. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? Like we can look back. We can look back at everything and say, like, yeah, it's led to this very exact point.
That's why
But
sometimes we don't have to be that pissed off about losses. Like there's a different something we're just not
right, so
seeing.
that's also a fair point too. Like we shouldn't think the roof is caving in every time we lose a game, right? But listen, with Tampa Bay, I know you say like you want to dismiss it, but like they're 3-1 against us in the last 4 times we played them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well,
Like,
I take the Tom ones out because he's Tom Brady's not. It's
all
not.
right, let's take the Tom ones out.
It's
The
too.
last 2 times we played them, they've kicked their teeth in. You know what I'm saying? And I know one of them you dismissed because of the collapse, but like you can't just dismiss that. It's part of the record.
Yeah.
And we played them in Tampa Bay. That's
Yeah.
part of the record too.
Yeah.
And if you're a 5 seed, if Washington wins the division and you're a 5 seed, you're going to go on the road to a team like a Tampa Bay, or you're going to go on the road somewhere.
Right.
And it's not like Todd Bowles is a slouch of a coach either, man.
No, I agree with that.
You know what I'm saying? So he, like, at the very least, Jalen Hurts has a tough time against Todd Bowles. So would it be out of the realm of comprehension that they could knock out Philadelphia? No, of course not. Do I believe in Philadelphia to go on the road and beat Tampa Bay? I certainly do. But again, it's all a game of probability and chance. Like that's what football is. There's no guarantee in the NFL. You're just playing probabilities. The
That's why.
probability of a team like the Rams going to Lincoln Financial Field and potentially winning a game, while it's lower than them while it's lower for them winning the game versus losing the game, they have a better shot than anybody else in the National Football League, I think, in the NFC. Like I don't think Detroit can go on the road. I don't think Washington could go to Lincoln Financial Field for a second year in a row and hold up their end of the bargain. I don't think that's going to happen. I think the Rams could. I think Tampa Bay potentially could because Baker's just that much of a psycho and will make any throw and every throw if he has to do so. You know what I'm saying? It's not like Jalen Hurts against Todd Bowles has had the best track record either. Like,
Oh,
he
another
doesn't
thing
play
is,
well.
I know we've actually taken people off the roster, but our defense was nowhere near what it was at the end of the season when we played Tampa in week 4.
That's fair. And then again, that's totally fair. And again, I'm just saying it's just based on what we've seen as
Right.
a
You
track
can
record
only
at
go
the
off
moment.
that.
You
You
know what I'm
can't go
saying?
off of
And again, even the games that Tampa Bay has lost in the playoffs, 1 point games. They lost very close game to Detroit on the road when they got
Washington
to the
was
NFC title game. They
insane.
lost to Washington last second, 24-23. Like it's not like Tampa Bay is just this slouch organization. Baker Mayfield
No.
is a playoff performer. They have veteran presence who have Super Bowl resumes
In
and
the
Super
in the
Bowl
NFC,
pedigree.
I'd say like the most consistent franchises that you can always bank on would be Philly. I would say would be Tampa. I would say would be the Rams. I would say would be San Francisco and Green Bay mostly. Beyond that, yeah, I don't really know about who's necessarily been that consistent in terms of contending for the biggest honors. So yes, Tampa would be on that list of teams that I probably prefer not to play overall, I would say.
Yeah, 100%. And again,
Yeah.
that we're gonna have to. You know what I'm saying? Like I think it's very likely that we're going to have to play these teams. And
Yeah.
you know, if I had to put money on it, I would pick Philadelphia for sure.
Our games are definitely gonna be harder though. Like
Yeah, they're gonna be much
when
harder.
you're the
They are.
champion, we learned this when and we still be able to make the playoffs as a wild card in that year with Nick Foles coming in and out and Carson Wentz coming back and all that happened in that season. But we know that everyone always gives you their best shot when you're the champ. It's the
Yeah, for
hardest
sure.
season to play when you are literally, wanted. Like when you have a guy who's out for wanted, you know,
Yeah.
I will give you a hefty payout if you bring this guy into us. That's what we are this year. You know what I mean?
Yeah, man. Yeah, we're the hunted now. We're the hunted. We're not hunting anymore. And you know what I'm saying? Like we're the top dogs. So everyone's gonna give us their best shot. And also, war of attrition is gonna play a role into this too. If everyone's giving us the best shot, like it's gonna be a long, long season. So you have to have roster depth. And again, just to kind of wheel us back into the draft talk, it's why I think, if you're not getting a surefire starter in the first round, then you trade back and just try to build depth on your roster and then just add veterans to help supplement your defense
Yeah, I
because
agree. Look, I think that he's got so many different avenues he can go down, as we've mentioned. Like you have a short list of what you want to go to in the draft. If you don't get that, you have backup options. We couldn't, apparently last year, Howie really wanted to get an offensive lineman in the first round.
Mhm.
And in fact, he didn't end up picking a lineman until very late on into the draft. And then ended up getting Rakai Becton, who was basically played an all pro level this season. Like,
100%, dude. Yeah.
so that's just the advantage that we have. Number one, we are the champs. We do not have any pressure on us. This is the 1 year. Like, to be honest, most seasons, like, we got to get this guy. You know what I mean? There's a one player or two players in my draft. I'm like, we desperately need this guy. We're still chasing it. Like last year, I said we desperately needed a corner. He got us two of them, right? If we wasn't gonna go corner, I would have lost my shit. I mean, probably if he would have taken an edge rusher like a Chop Robinson or anything, I'd probably been like, okay, pretty standard. I'm not surprised.
Mhm.
We needed a corner. The year before that, we needed Jalen Carter, or I had Jalen Carter or Bijan Robinson. Those were like for me, like we either go one way, we're gonna go an elite running back prospect, or we were going to go for a generational talent that everyone was sleeping on. And we all knew. I know everybody seems so surprised that the Eagles got him at 9. And that year I did my mock draft, I had him at 10 every single time.
Right.
Like, if you were going to trade up in that draft for me, it would have been to get Bijan. But because of what happened with him in the driving thing, Jalen Carter was always going to get us. If we passed on Jalen Carter, that would have been a fail, right? The year before that, we knew we needed a defensive tackle, another defensive tackle. So we got Jordan Davis. Jordan Davis, I was very certain that's the player I wanted to get. Now we end up being in a situation where Hamilton was on the board when we picked, and I was like, maybe actually I might go get Hamilton, right? But he still went with the guy that everyone wanted, even though I don't know how he's panned out as a pro, but we knew that we needed that, right? And of course, that year we ended up going to the Super Bowl. And the year before that, before as well, we desperately needed a receiver. We effed up on one and we hit gold on the others. This is the first draft since Dick Sirianni has become the head coach that I'm like, Howie, you can do whatever you want and I don't care. Have free reign. Whatever you
That's
feel,
also fair. That's
whatever
fair.
you feel, just go for it.
Right. That's fair, especially in this draft. Especially in this draft.
Yeah. Well, anyway, we've actually almost gone almost 4 hours on this podcast. So we should wrap this up in a second. I just want to kind of just to close out. I think we've kind of already covered where you think we will be next year. So we've had that chat already. Who do you really like amongst the prospects in year's draft in terms of a fit for the Birds? Like, have you looked at any prospects we've even spoken about, or ones even that we have already? Kind of like who you would really want to see us pick, and at what position, really.
So I guess in terms of prospects who I like in the draft, I love Um, Malaki Starks, I think he would be the ideal pick at safety if he ends up being at 32. I just don't think he'll fall to us. I think another player that they would really like to have is a Walter Nolan. Um, but again, see, it kind of just depends if they decide to either trade up for a guy like that or they, see how the draft falls. In terms of guys on the roster who I believe can come in and um, step up this year and bring really good play, that's tough because we also don't know exactly what other holes Howie's going to fill on the roster. But at least for today, for what we have right now, I think the guy that's going to step up and just be super productive is going to be a player like Jalix Hunt. I think,
And has not said his name really much at all today.
yeah.
We
So
talk about
I think
Ojolari and Uche, but really that's the guy that the Eagles want to win that job is Jalix Hunt.
right, right. And I know Bryce Huff's also another obvious answer because he can't be much worse than what he was.
And also considering what they're paying him.
Right, especially with what they're paying him. So he's definitely going to get more production for sure. But
Which
I
is
think
why if
Jalix
we
Hunt,
didn't get edge rusher in the draft, I wouldn't be that pissed. Because to be honest, the edge rusher we're bringing in, how does he fare amongst those names that we've just listed? Like, what type of quality really is he at pick 32? I mean, unless, of course, as you said, you get a Pierce, who, by the way, I have questions on his ability to tackle. He doesn't have a really a great motor in his ability to close down players. So that is
but that's coachable, isn't it? Isn't that something that's coachable?
it is
You know?
it's coachable.
Right. So that those are the things that I try to look at in a draft prospect too. Like somebody's feel for the game is not coachable. Like you
I
can't
love
teach
his
somebody the
size,
game.
though. His size, his speed, his athleticism is actually probably one of, I'd say, next to Abdul Carter or Jalen Walker up there.
Yeah, I agree. Like I think physically he's as gifted as anybody
Yeah.
in this draft, and he's the most polished in terms of pass rushing. Like I think he's got the most moves in terms of going after, the field. But sometimes, the things that he's weak at are things that are coachable. And I think when you pair him with Fangio and Clint Hurd and you pair him with like Carter and all these other guys, I think if that's the player that we end up getting at 32, we hit a home run. You know what I'm saying? I think you hit a home run in that sense. But to your question about whether or not like the guys that you get like a Scourton or Sawyer, are they comparable to what we have on the roster right now? I don't know if it's so much about the production that you're going to get, but the production you get at the value that you have with them. I've been saying all offseason. I think you kind of been saying it too with the Timo offseason. It's all about the dollars and the cents with the Philadelphia Eagles this offseason. How much bang for their buck can they get by saving the most money? That's been what they've been trying to do, and that's why they're kind of almost setting it up for where 2026 will be the year that hey, we're gonna kind of push most of the chips towards the table here and start making some real moves because if the gap is as significant as most people believe there is, then Philadelphia is playing with house money. You know what I'm saying? So that's why I would trade out of the first round, take a kid like Scourton, and hope for the best at that point at 64 and see what other depth you can get
You know
because
what? You know what would be even crazier? I just thought. Let's say you try, and this sounds like bad value, but at the end of the day, if we're talking about just short term, it's not. It's way above what Cincinnati values in that. But let's say you just traded 32 straight up and get Trey Hendrickson. Now, in a general draft, that is an awful business on the side of the Eagles. In this year's draft, I think your 32 edge rusher is a second or third rounder in any other draft, and Trey Hendrickson makes the roster better.
true, it's just a matter of money at that point though.
Yeah.
You pay 1 year for
Correct.
1 year X amount
Right.
of money, right? So, but yeah, but to your point though, trading the first round pick for a veteran player like that, or a guy like a Walker, maybe. Yeah, again, I think it would take a little bit more to get Trayvon Walker. You know,
Trayvon Walker was the number one overall pick. Like
right, right,
he's going to
exactly, and
need a lot of money a second contract. Although I don't think Trayvon Walker has produced that much in Jacksonville over his first three seasons in the NFL.
no, but that's also what the market dictates,
It's also
right?
where he landed.
Yeah. So like that's also
Talent
part of the
over there is
equation too.
number one
But
over.
but your point still stands though. Would it be the worst idea to trade that 32nd pick for a veteran pass rusher? No,
Trayvon
probably not.
Walker. We're going to have Trayvon Walker or Donovan Ezra-Walker.
Of course, I would have Trayvon Walker.
Right, same.
Yeah, 100%. So again, it's certainly not the worst idea. Again, it's just a matter of are they willing to put up the money to pay for some of these guys, especially because they got to pay Carter down the road, and they got to pay Blankenship, they got to pay Jurgens. Like that's why I think the only way they would stick at 32 is if there's an edge player that they get or a defensive lineman that they get that you can have the 5th-year option on.
Or
That's
they,
good value.
or they just go up and get him.
Or they go up and get
That's to me. I think I don't think we're picking it. I'll be straight up. I know I've
I don't think they
done it
pick
in
at
the mock
32. I
draft.
think they either trade
Yeah,
back or they trade up.
I don't think we're picking the 30. I don't think we're taking the 32nd pick. Actually,
I agree with you. I tend to agree with you. I think
we're
we're trading up.
trading up,
I think
trading back, or trading out completely and getting a
Yeah,
veteran.
no, I think we end up trading up. I think depending on where Shador falls, if Shador gets taken by the Saints, I think the Steelers are in a tough spot with quarterback,
Because for the Steelers, for me, the only thing is the Steelers and look, Minnesota aren't picking quarterback because regardless of if Aaron comes in or not, they got a first round quarterback from last season who is, I'd say, again in a better draft. JJ McCarthy is probably better than Jackson Dart, right? So, or even I don't know how he compares to Shador. I'd say he would. I mean, JJ McCarthy is a national championship winner, right? Playing in the Big Ten versus Shador Sanders playing at Colorado. I just think the levels are a bit different as well. But Pittsburgh, to me, I feel like I think that's where Aaron Rodgers lands. And for me, I'm not, unless it is Shador Sanders, I'm not spending the 21st pick on Jackson Dart because I can wait into the second round and get Milrow, or in the third round I can get Milrow, depending. A lot of the teams aren't needing quarterbacks.
No, that's fair, but again, I guess my point being is like, can you jump a team that's not in the run for a quarterback here?
One
Who
thing I'll say
needs
about
more?
Pittsburgh though is Pittsburgh tends to be one of the better, more savvy franchises. They don't tend to reach on players. They are the opposite. They're like us, they're like Baltimore. They tend to get players that fall to them who are of a better value of where we're picking at. So that's why I haven't put Pittsburgh in there. If I'm the Steelers and I think about the way, and by the way, the Steelers general manager used to be our assistant general manager, right?
Mhm.
If he's anything like Howie, he's not reaching at quarterback. He's going to get the best player available then, and knowing he can get a quarter. He's looking at his draft chart and saying, where am I going to get a better value at quarterback? In the first round or in the second round?
Or maybe even a guy like a Kirk Cousins who's low
Right.
maintenance,
That's another thing. If the Aaron Rodgers thing goes to shit, you got Kirk Cousins as a low hanging fruit, and I don't think it costs that much to go get him.
Right, exactly. So, but yeah, but no, we'll see, man. Again, I think if anything, Philadelphia will trade up and try to get an edge player like a Stewart or a Pierce, or maybe even a Walter Nolan if a team like the Ravens decide to get
Yeah.
him.
Can I tell you though? I think we're going to be happy with whoever we get if we do pick in the first round, because
Every
some
Eagle fan
way
will be.
every single year. This is where we'll probably wrap up the show and my sort of feelings when it comes to draft. Since by the way, we know we have a lot of criticism for Sirianni, but since Sirianni has become the head coach, Howie Roseman has been at his best, especially on draft night, and he's on his bag. It's not about who he picks, but who he's able to pick up. Like the AJ Brown when we had the 3 first round picks, and we really ended up leaving with AJ Brown and Jordan Davis, and we traded back to get Jalen Carter as a first round pick the next year, and ended up being able to get Drew Cooper DeJean, like basically eventually, right? In that draft as well, he got Cam Jurgens as well. I think about the very next year, we got Jalen Carter at the first round, and then I wake up later on, I'm like, well, we really need to draft a corner. We got Keely Ringo at the start of the third day, and we got DeAndre Swift. I was like, what?
Yeah,
We're needing
right.
like Bijan Robinson, Bijan Robinson, Bijan Robinson. And then we ended up with both Jalen Carter and a really good running back. And now we ended up having Jalen Carter and Saquon Barkley. It's better than just having taken Bijan Robinson. Like Howie always finds a way. If he likes someone, he'll end up with that guy. Last year, we got Quinion Mitchell, which at the time when we were picking, it was a no-brainer. But I did not expect us to then double dip and go and get Cooper the next day.
Right. Did I?
So
Neither did
I
I.
think regardless, we're going to be happy with how this turns out. I've gotten to that point with him where I just don't think it's going to be one of those days we're disappointed. We have learned, of having watched him operate enough, that even let's say we're waiting all day and we're at 32 and all of a sudden it's like, the Eagles have now traded pick 32 to blah, 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 blah. We're like, okay, cool. Tomorrow we're going to rock. That's the way I kind of feel.
Right, and that's fair. But again, I'm also not going to go in expecting that Howie's going to hit on every single thing he does
I
anymore.
guess
You
that's
know what I'm saying?
part of the magic of it. You never
And
do.
that's
You
part of
never
the, like
expect
you
it.
said, part of the magic of it. But I'm also, it's a new season now, right? We saw what he did in 2022, and then what happened in 23. You
I
know what I'm
want to see
saying?
what a Howie that's not as desperate looks like, though, because while when we say that he's got the latitude because the Lurie's put so much trust in him and stuff like that to be able to take risks, I don't think he's also taking risks because that Super Bowl that we just won was so important to him.
We just won. Yep.
So I wanted to see what this version of Howie is. Is he still? Because to be honest, if that was me, why defer away from something that's been working for me so well? At this point, the money is not a thing. We've already gone beyond that part of the offseason. Now we're at the draft part. It's about we can only go up from here. Let's see what we got. We got 20 picks to work with. You know what I
Right.
mean? Over the next two drafts. I reckon I wouldn't be surprised if out of 20 we end up with picking maybe 12 or 14 guys overall. You know what I mean?
That's a
So,
lot. That's a,
I mean,
that's a
that's
lot
in
of
general.
players. Yeah.
Average, everyone gets 7 picks per year, you know? All
Right.
right.
That's
Yeah.
fair. That's fair.
Yeah. So it's like 6 or 7 picks per draft instead of having 10 per draft.
Right. True. That's fair. That's also fair.
Yeah.
You know. But
Anyway, we are 1 minute away from having gone 4 hours on this podcast. So if anyone is able to get this far into our podcast, I think you've gotten the full ultimate off-season guide between me and Asaf here on the Philadelphia Eagles. So and by the way, I gotta big up my boy Asaf, my first ever guest I've ever had on Sport. So I've been going at it alone this whole time. I finally got someone to bounce off of, someone to challenge me and my opinions on the other side, which is always very fun. It makes for better content. Big him up. Go over to his channel to Riding the Bench Eagles. Make sure you follow him because like honestly, and I know talent. Like I see I watch, a bunch of different content creators everywhere, and you can see when someone's got talent. Asaf ball knowledge is clearly insane. He's very passionate about
I
the Eagles,
appreciate
man.
that.
Go check him out. You will not be disappointed. And again, you get to see both of us guys on Jacob. I think next year when the season rolls around and we get to go back and forth with Xander again, which would be a bit more. I think it'll be a bit of a more humble and relaxed Xander. I've seen the way he's been this off season. A
Yeah.
little bit
Well,
less.
100%. Yeah, absolutely, man. No, this was a fun time. I appreciate you, bringing me on and letting me kind of talk my Eagles talk for this long. I know
Yeah,
it sometimes can be a little bit more
might split this podcast
long-winded.
up into two parts. Give it to part one. Maybe I'll split it the part with my headphones when out. You know what I mean?
Fair enough. Fair enough. Fair enough. But
Yeah,
again, regardless of the fun time, I appreciate this. This was a nice recap of just like, watching the Eagles offseason unfold and how it's gonna maybe go head into the draft. And the NFL draft is here, and hopefully it leads to some more good things.
yeah. Well, I'd love to hook up with you again sometime in the near future. I think it would be you're more than welcome to come back at any time. Maybe we can revisit on your channel. We'll see what happens. But yeah, it's been a massive, massive fun, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed everything, especially if you're Birds fans here, because I cover things all type of sports, but the Eagles are really one of my passion. My real teams, and I really got to kind of delve into the Eagles. Really, I think we dissected us from top to bottom. You know what I mean? The past, the future, the present, next week. We got it all covered. So thank you very much, everyone, for tuning in, and we'll see you guys next time. Peace.
Take care.